Hey American Dream, welcome to the basement. Very quick update here. You guys, thanks to the extra remote block we were able to get because of our cohort split, and you guys successfully navigated joining us Tuesday morning, so we were able to give you the same lesson we gave students that are coming into school. You're caught up. There is one lesson that I made sure to record, just me, not your classmates, going over all that we learn in the first 11 pages of Gatsby and how important the geography of this area of the country is to Fitzgerald's storytelling. So I recorded myself in the classroom. You'll see I've got my mask on. The whiteboard's going to be a little washed out, but if you want to see your own version of the map that I'm talking about, it's at the bottom of your Introduction to Gatsby Characters note sheet. There is a picture of East Egg and West Egg and Manhattan and Queens that you can draw over if you wanted to print it out, or just look at it as a secondary reference as I'm going over all that we learn about Nick and Gatsby and Daisy and Tom. Okay, I'm going to start that video now. And other than that, you are caught up with students that are getting class in the building. Enjoy. This drawing up here is not something you have to try to recreate and draw in your notebook. You have a copy of it. It is on the bottom of your character note sheet. Underneath that, there is a map of this area, this sort of blown up circle of the fictionalized Long Island that has the fictionalized names on it, overlaid on the actual geography of New York City. So even though you've only done 11 pages, I chose that stopping point because so much about the way this novel is structured has already been established. So I kind of wanted to just give a tour of what you know so that we could iron out some of those things that Mr. Gum helped you spot. Was people were putting Tom as the narrator, or it's called The Great Gatsby, so isn't Gatsby in here already? Well, he is, but you haven't met him. You won't meet him for a few chapters. You'll get a glimpse of him at the end of your next reading. But he's definitely there, and that is important, okay? So everyone take a look at this, because my green marker is going to be sort of a tour of what we've done so far. So, the other thing Mr. Gunn mentioned is that Nick is the narrator, so whenever you hear I, that's Nick speaking. And so you can think of Minnesota, that is a state out here in the Midwest, that's Nick's origin and where he has returned to. So the action of the story, Nick is no longer there. He has come back. That already tells you something about how this story is going to unfold. And he also starts the narration with, in my younger and more vulnerable years. That is a wordy way of saying, back when I was a kid. Right? And so this big red quote bubble that I have is a symbol of Nick saying to you, his audience, hey, I want to tell you a story about this one time back when I was a kid, I went out east. And when that tells us he's now back. Right? So this whole novel is like a My Summer Vacation, like what I did on my summer vacation essay by Nick Carraway. And so when he goes, it's 1920, so it's probably a train that takes him out there. He gets some help from his dad. Some of you figured that out. So it's not like he's a man of no privilege. He gets some help to give it a try, to make his name in the bond business, which means he's got to be near New York City, the stock market. So here's my New York City in Manhattan with my dollar signs. And it's not like New York City has really symbolically changed that much for us. It's still the home of America's stock market, a place to go make money making money. But that's not where he's going to live. He's going to settle, much like they do in this area still, he's going to settle in the suburbs and commute into work by train. So he settles on Long Island. And Long Island is a much more complicated island than this. And it has all sorts of places where you can get yourself a beautiful home on the water, especially in here, Long Island Sound, so you don't have the the wake of the larger ocean, the tides, I should say, the waves. So you have a beautiful beachfront property. And so we learn of two geographic outcroppings known as West Egg and East Egg. And Nick finds himself a place. It's kind of interesting. He had a roommate, but the roommate dropped out. So he ends up alone. Then he has a dog, and the dog also runs away. So it feels like Nick, maybe there's some issues there with Nick. And he notes that next to him is a giant mansion that looks like the Hotel de Ville in Normandy, France. Now, why would Nick know that? Because he's been to France. Why was Nick in France? Because he's been to World War I. So even before this telling starts, he has left Minnesota, not for another part in America, but he has, been planed out to be a troop in World War I, and then he comes back, and you can imagine coming back to his hometown in Minnesota and being like, the world's bigger. And so when he goes and is next door neighbors, he sort of recognizes the architecture because he's seen it before. And so has the guy that lives here. This is Gatsby's mansion. This is his neighbor. And so Gatsby built this place to look like that, to look rich. But it's new. It looks old, but it's a new building. It's like for us, if you've ever been to Vegas and you've reached to touch a marble column and realized it's just made out of that plaster, it's made to look like something old, but it's actually new. It looks like an amusement park, and sometimes it'll even be described like that, because Gatsby is new rich, and in a way, so kind of is Nick's new to this area too, but of course Nick's just in this little bungalow. So that's West Egg, and he goes and he is able to now, instead of taking a train, he's able to be driven over to the Buchanan's house. And they are old rich. Now, this isn't actually Tom Buchanan's childhood home. He does say he got it from Dumaine, the oil man. But if we are here in our timeline, turn of the century, late 1800s, oil is part of that robber baron and steel and industry and all that sort of industrial revolution. Not where Gatsby's going to get his money from, as we will find out, but this traditional way of industry, and then also passing it along. So I got this from the Dumaine, the oil man. And that's where the dinner party takes place. And so that is where we meet Tom Buchanan, his wife Daisy Buchanan, and then their friend Jordan Baker, who's just hanging out there. In the second chapter, your characters will get on a train and they will cross through what is called the Valley of Ashes, and that seems to overlap with modern-day Queens. And you have to go through this area where other people are living to cross this bridge into the city where the money is made. And the whole of the action of 1922, that summer, is going to happen in this bubble. The bubble, I think, is a good word for it. It's not where all the story happens, because we have to consider what people bring into the bubble. Nick went to war and came back. You'll find that Gatsby went to war and came back. And Daisy, as I mentioned in the other video, comes from Louisville and ends up here. And so one of the big questions is going to be, where did Gatsby come from? And how did he get from where he came from to become the Great Gatsby? And that's where the novel name comes from. Not that our narrator is the Great Gatsby, but rather our narrator observes the Great Gatsby. Observes him And then because he says, well, back when I was a kid, in my younger and more vulnerable days, observes him and comes back. We pick all of that stuff up in the first 11 pages. Okay? The rest of chapter 1 is all dinner party. You're going to meet more of Tom's behaviors. He's going to go get a phone call. He's going to share a book that he's been reading that's racist. Right? Pay attention to those things. You'll learn more about Jordan. As I mentioned, you'll learn that she's a professional golfer. And Nick's going to go home at the very end, which means that he gets in the car, goes back onto the other side of this bay. So the Buchanan's house is across the way. And he looks over to his next door neighbor's house, and his neighbor's there. His neighbor is out. And that neighbor is Gatsby. So keep an eye out for that, because that's the last pages of chapter 1. You will, for yourself, get your first sight of the Great Gatsby. Sound like a plan?